All right. This is, I think, like live stream 28 or 29. Can't quite remember. But anyhow, this is the live stream where I work on book 2 of 2 stories, book 1 of 2 stories. You can order on Amazon, and it is a confessional graphic memoir that grapples with questions of faith, mental illness, depravity, and ultimately redemption in a fallen world. It's 122-ish pages. And what I'm doing on these streams is working on book 2, and I'm working on thumbnails / roughs. And I'm kind of mixing the two to basically try to kind of work out the entire book before getting into final pencils, final type, and final layout and stuff. But this show is basically a show where I just kind of hang out with people, draw, talk about art, and talk about the process, and then also get some work done. So if you're joining me or watching this after the fact, welcome. And I'm going to get into this. It's been a chaotic day. Usually I have like some kind of rough topic on my mind. I did a little interview for Frank's Tarocco podcast, Tarocco Cast. And that's on YouTube. And so you can check that out, Tarocco and Joshua Kemble, and you can watch that interview with Frank and Anna Raub and Frank, my goodness, I am blanking out. Frank Salazar. They're both really cool people and were nice enough to have me on. And we talked about 2 stories and my faith. And it was a fun conversation, and I appreciated having them on. Frank had posted like a really nice review of 2 stories on his channel as well. So we're checking out. All right. So other than that, I don't have a ton on my mind, so I'm probably just going to try to get through this page. It's been a chaotic day, just a lot of art director stuff, and then outside of that, just one of those days where I'm very behind where I need to be. So I should also mention I'm doing the 100 Days of Making Comics Challenge, and this is day 55 of that. So so I need to get in at least an hour. That's the minimum that I established, mainly because my friend Scott Cirkland is equally doing the challenge and set an hour, and that seemed reasonable to me. So far, these streams usually clock at a couple hours, but tonight I think I'm going to try, let's see, it's like 11:12. So I'm going to try to be wrapped up around 12. And you'll also notice in the background right here is a little strange silhouette. Who could that be? That is my wife, and she is working on illustrating kids' books right in the background. So it's like a drawing night where we're all hanging out and drawing stuff, which is great. Drawing stuff is fun. I am also having a limited series Bravery Brewing Company beer, which is pretty tasty. And Chris Kawagua is in the chats, dude. Are you going to be up for a while? Because if you are, I can send you a link and you can come hang out if you want. If not, no worries. I'm going to send it to you. If you don't want to join and you're maybe drawing or doing something where streaming wouldn't work, that's fine, but you're also always welcome. My good friend Chris Kawagua, brilliant illustrator. Am I wrong about that, Mai? Would you say Chris is a talented illustrator? Okay, so you guys probably couldn't hear that, but she said he is, and so is his wife. So, I got it. He said, just sat down, but I'm in a blanket already. That's a good way to go. All right. Well, my goal is to hopefully just power through the rest of this page. I got halfway through on the last stream, and then life has just been crazy and chaotic, and I need to progressively make more comics and make more stuff. I will say, Chris, after COVID, we need to go to this brewery. Bravery Brewery is a very good one. And this is a Belgian style pale ale, which I'm kind of a fan of. All right, so I'm not really usually into like Belgian pale ale. I tend to like Indian pale ale, but blah, blah, blah. But it's not bad. So, okay. Here we go. Chris said, Belgians are great. That's true. Belgians are great people. All right, so here we go. I'm going to rock some of this page, and I got to figure out and remember where exactly I was. What are you up to, Chris? Are you crashing? You about to turn in for the night? Let's see here. I did read a really cool article on Boing Boing, which I don't even know. Maybe I'm old, but I'm not even aware of what that magazine is. But when I read news, I tend to read it through Google News because I don't really like get cable or anything like that. So I'll check out like through certain news sites like Reuters and Salon and stuff like that I constantly check. The Guardian, but or NPR, that kind of thing. But other than that, I just occasionally will peruse Google News, and I was shocked because for anyone who knows me, they know that I can barely go a day without mentioning the band Fugazi, which is one of my favorite bands. And there was an interview with Ian MacKaye where he was talking about his influences and what got him into music. And it was really kind of cool and surprising and awesome. And I think a lot of people would be shocked that like one of the big inciting incidents for him in rock and roll was Woodstock, which is just such a polar opposite thing from what a lot of punks I think would have viewed it as. Because he was such a like huge influence on hardcore punk. And so it's kind of interesting. To me, it just reinforces one of my theories about punk rock, which is I tend to view punk rock as kind of like a vibe, like an attitude and a certain like lack of having like masters or gatekeepers, and I tend to think punk rock is like an FU to like the system kind of thing. And so because of my weird definition of punk rock, like there are bands that I would consider more punk rock than a lot of bands that label themselves as punk rock. Like I think of like Bob Dylan as like one of the most punk rock people ever. And something like Highway 61 Revisited to me seems like a punk album. It's like it's more punk rock than half the 90s punk albums. But anyhow, I was pleased to find out that Ian MacKaye probably views music in a similar way, which was kind of cool. So I saw that before starting my stream. And now I'm going to try to work on this panel. So, okay, here we go. Where did we leave? Forced into it. That's the last part. Okay. Chris said, I don't know nothing about punk rock music, but I do understand the concept. Indie comics are punk rock. I agree. There's like an ethos to it that's very DIY and very like author centered and very much like like against the grain and against what authority, like approved authority figures think. That's kind of what I see it as. So like one of my favorite documentaries, like I used to be obsessed with rockumentaries, and here's just backing up the Dylan being punk rock thing. There's a rockumentary called Don't Look Back, which is following Bob Dylan, and it's like during the first tour where he made the transition from being like a folk artist to being like to going electric. And it was just shocking and pissed off like the majority of his core fans, because keep in mind, like when Dylan released Freewheelin' Bob Dylan, it was like this massive impact on the music scene and the folk scene, which was huge at the time. And Dylan just sort of came in and like became like this god to like all these people who really praised like traditional folk music. And so they were like, this is like the rebirth of Woody Guthrie. Like this is the classic folk music. It followed like most of that album follows like these traditional folk structures that are like guitar riffs that have been handed down and passed on. And a lot of them were borrowed from like war songs or like old love ballads that, you know, date back to like Ireland, like before America even existed. And he was speaking this really powerful kind of protest music that relied on like very traditional folk means. And so keep in mind, like a lot of the people who were really into Dylan after Freewheeling were like college educated kind of hippies, but like they're like the type of hippie that would like, if something used an electric guitar, they'd like turn it off and like snub their noses at it. Like, oh, this is disgusting. We only listen to like folk. And so he played at like Carnegie, I think it was at Carnegie Hall where he plays the show. It's like his first show where he's not playing an acoustic guitar. And he's introduced by this somewhat like smarmy announcer who's like, ladies and gentlemen, this is the poet of our generation. And it goes into this whole long spiel. You can look it up. But this long spiely, kind of pretentious like introduction to Bob Dylan, where it's like, this is the poet of our generation. He's a folk musician. He understands like the power. And it's almost pretty much implied like this guy is sticking with the traditions. And it's very much like trying to bury him in like this traditional arc. And then he's like this political figure, and that he's a folk guy and he's a poet and he's quiet. And it's kind of fitting for, you know, like an indoor, like orchestral arrangement kind of scenario. And he comes out and they're just plugged in, like his whole band is plugged in. It's got like an electric bass guitar. He's on electric guitar, just kind of plucking away, doing like this finger picking style on a telly. And just like they're loud and obnoxious. And his lyrics aren't like, you know, the times they are changing, where it's like times they are changing, beautiful song, but it's like not hard to interpret. It's pretty on the nose. But, you know, this is just like this weird freestyling poetry, and Dylan's voice is all over the place. Like he's not doing this like folk thing. And the whole audience just starts booing, like, you know, because they're like, we came here to see the guy who wrote that folk album, and like, what is this? You know, it's like they expected to see him, a harmonica and an acoustic guitar, and instead they're getting just this brazen loud, just dish, dish. Like, anyhow, so the whole audience starts booing, and Dylan turns to his band and says, F him, play louder. And I'm like, that's punk rock. Like he's at the peak of his career. He could have just cashed in and continued to do the thing that he already did perfectly, and probably made another album that's exactly the same, like a carbon copy. But he instead just made art and presented it to people and was like, you will like digest this, and if you don't, you suck. Like, and I don't know. There's to me that's like the ethos of punk. Like I don't know. It's very communal, but at the same time, there is an attitude of like, I'm going to make my art and you will like it. And if you don't like it, you suck. Um, so yeah, I think that's one of the most punk rock things in the world. And then Pills in Ibiza is telling me that's not punk rock. Well, good for you, Pills. Tell me what punk rock is. I'm curious. Um, yeah, Chris, you're right. Like Inside Llewyn Davis said something interesting about some interesting things about the folk music scene. Yeah, and I think it was based around that whole scene in like New York at the time, with like that kind of movement and stuff. So that's why I kind of feel like, you know, that's pretty punk rock. But I'm curious to hear Pills in Ibiza's um, definition of punk rock. Um, I tend to think it's just rock and roll and it's sexy and dangerous. And I think the cool thing about um, rock and roll, that's real rock and roll, is it's going to either be sexy or dangerous. And that moment with Dylan was totally dangerous. And that's why I kind of classify it as punk rock. All right. So let's see here. What do we have? I'm going to keep moving through this though. All right, so I have to figure out this next sequence, and it's going to talk about antidepressants. And I want to bring back, I had this whole sequence on the page prior where it was kind of doing, unfortunately, Photoshop. I don't know if you've noticed this, Chris. But like, let's see here. But like, I like to use sequences where you're kind of repeating and kind of almost like sampling, like in hip hop, and it like with panels where you're kind of repeating the same panel over and over again, um, in order to kind of create impact. I like doing that in comics, and I kind of feel like that's something where this is a point. I agree with that. When things get too mainstream, it loses its edge. And I think that's why it was so great, at least that moment in Don't Look Back, where it was like he had kind of lost his edge in that sense because it was just so accepted, like that album. And to kind of switch it up and try something entirely new and its like own style was like very risky and dangerous to his career and to that crowd. And I think that I don't know. I view that as punk rock. But once again, like I'm curious because like Pills was disparaging that, and yet I haven't heard them actually define what they think punk rock is. So I'd be curious to kind of hear. All right, so let's see here. This is gonna say, okay, I gotta write this bit. I didn't say is, I said was. So I think that's interesting. Again, you haven't defined punk rock. It's fun when someone in the, I don't know. I find that interesting because I'd like to hear your definition and we'll see if that moment was punk rock or not. But I'd say that was way more punk rock than like Blink 182 or some like crappy sellout like punk band. You know, that's what I would. That's how I would view it. I don't know. We'll see. All right. So, like, that's more punk rock than most OC punks. Let's see here. Okay. Okay. Let's see here. The anti. Just writing this down. Ooh, this is interesting. Pills and Ibiza was asking, do I think John Linden thinks Dylan was punk rock? So Johnny Rotten, though, like, I love the Sex Pistols, but arguably, like most people would make the argument that the Sex Pistols were a boy band. Like, they were great. They did some really cool music that challenged the system, but they were also sort of a boy band that was kind of set up. But great stuff. But like, once again, kind of a producer run band. So I don't really know. I do like, this is my favorite mythos of John Linden. There's a movie about the Sex Pistols where they're on a boat and they're kind of running from the cops. Well, they're not really running from the cops. They're just getting up to like mischief on this. Yeah, they're a lot like the Monkees, Chris. That's actually a really good point. I guess they kind of wrote their own music, so it's a little different. But yeah. Anyhow, so there is this great scene though where they're on a boat and up to a bunch of mischief, and the cops like kind of start pulling their boats like kind of behind the boat, and he turns around and goes, "I didn't know pigs could float," which is kind of interesting, and I love that line. All right, so let's see here. So Pills and Ibiza, like, you're very incendiary about punk rock, but you've like completely failed to even define what you think it is. So it's kind of like the guys who are saying this isn't art, but you don't have a definition of art. It's not really, I don't know, it's kind of interesting. It's interesting how people without any grounding in an argument like get kind of argumentational. So let's see here. Effective.
I think Johnny Rotten really believed it, but he didn't realize at the time he was being kind of played.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. Well, once again, you're in shock, but you have no grounding because you haven't even defined what you think punk is, dude. So, like I said, I'm open to hearing your disproof here. But I did find it interesting, like I said, Ian MacKaye is one of my favorite musicians in the world, and what prompted this. Oh yeah, I'd agree with that. Well, it was dangerous,
They themselves were really young and.
They were also like.
I think their intention was to be what.
Yeah, and they were like 15 years after Dylan, so.
But there were. I mean, there were other punk bands already. Like, they weren't the first, or anything like that.
Yeah. I mean,
it was English punk rock versus American. So it's almost like.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, and they definitely were saying some shocking things and.
Yeah.
But
I'm just curious to hear
what Bob Dylan did.
Yeah.
His action and his intention was very punk rock.
Yeah.
Because of.
And the music.
He wanted to put his finger to them, basically.
Oh, dude.
You can't define me. You can't.
Hang on a second. I love this. Third Secret knows what I'm talking about. Teen Idols. That's my kind of punk rock. Pills and Ibiza, again, dude, like, dude.
I'm just saying my opinion.
Oh, yeah. No, I love your opinion. I'm just amazed by like Pills and Ibiza's lack of opinion. Like, he likes to shit on opinions with no backing. So, again, dude, I'm down to get into it, but like, you got to have some ground at your argument. If you're not staking a claim, then you can't disprove it. You know what I mean?
Well, I mean, if you're just gonna say punk as a music,
I also,
genre, if it's just genre as a genre of music, then yeah, Dylan is not a punk music. But
well, I wouldn't put him in the punk section, but the punk section's BS
like
anyway.
Messages,
yeah, I mean, like, to me.
But not all punk bands were like necessarily like.
Yeah. I love this.
Either. I mean,
yeah.
Like, some of them were just like nihilists. Like, they didn't. Crass, for instance. I mean, they were really into peace, but they were also kind of. Well, they weren't really nihilists. They were.
Yeah. So I love this.
British,
I love what Chris is saying here, and I think this is pointing out why Pills and Ibiza's point is kind of ridiculous, because. So the labels can apply to ethos as much as genre. Also, categories are formed after a product is created. Like, for instance, Pills and Ibiza probably thinks Devo wasn't punk rock, because his knowledge of punk rock seems to begin and end at like the Sex Pistols, which is like weird because it's like, have you thought of like the Dwarves or like anything around that era other than like the most mainstream example of what you consider punk rock? Have you thought about the fact that the Clash absolutely hated the Sex Pistols and they had a whole feud and like different ethos on what they thought was punk rock, to the point where they got in like fist fights after shows? It's just something to consider, like, but anyhow, I know he wants me to take an IQ test. I love it. It's like the first time I've gotten like a major hater in the chats, and I'm down. Thank you for clarifying that third secret. Teen idols are great though. Okay. So anyhow, I'm going to get back to working on this next panel, but I do love debate. And I also like, once again, like, I think it's a worthy discussion, because it's like, some people define punk differently.
And the thing is, I'm not saying either that I hate the Sex Pistols.
Oh yeah, I wasn't saying I hate the Sex Pistols.
I love their music, but I think unfortunately their band manager, what's his name again? He was nutty.
I can't remember the dude's name, but he basically like ran him like a boy band and cast him and kind of was like, you guys will play this punk rock music. And I mean, he picked guys that were legitimately interested in punk rock, but like,
he told them they were going to change the world and all this stuff.
Mm-hmm.
He played them. I mean, like, of course, Sid Vicious was so drugged out that he didn't know what was going on, but John Lydon was kind of keen on it at one point and was just like devastated.
Yeah. And what's interesting is actually, I think Johnny Rotten might have thought Dylan was punk rock. Like, I think if you interviewed him now, he might actually think that.
I think he might have respected the guy, but I don't think he would have.
But like, what's interesting too is like, this is another thing people who think of Dylan now don't realize, like Hendrix like styled his hair based on Bob Dylan. Like, so Hendrix was looking to Dylan. So it's like an interesting thing. Chris Caligua, he knows me too well from college. Music history, debate, and a beer. Time for Josh to shine. Yeah. Anyhow, I'm always open to it.
Guy, like, upset with you or something?
No, it's just like there's a dude in the chats who is making the claim like he's not punk rock, and I was like, well, so what is punk rock? Oh. And he's failed to define it, but he's just been like, you're an imbecile, and like take an IQ test.
Oh, he's calling you an idiot and stuff?
Yeah, he's a troll. But I'm like, I'll engage. I have no problem with that. I'm just kind of curious, like,
have you had this person here before?
No, it's fun. It's the first. It's a first. That happens on streams though. That's a good sign. I'm more happy though, like, to kind of hear what all he has to say. But like, once again, it's been a while and I still haven't seen him define punk rock. So Okay, so anyhow, like once again, I think it's easy to when you have no standing.
Josh, to define punk rock isn't punk rock, is it?
I know. Also, to say something is not punk rock is not very punk rock. Okay, so let's see.
You really need to call Kevin and have him get in on this so he can be like.
I know. I'd love to have Kevin. Like, I'd be like, Kevin. He's like, hold my beer, but whatever.
Honey.
I love it. I love the. I think the person in the chats doesn't realize I actually enjoy conflict. All right, so here we go. So her, to, and then function. So anyhow, like I was pleased to see that interview with Ian McKay. So it was interesting. Agreed with Kemble. Trolls are a good sign. Yeah, and here's the thing. I don't mind feeding this troll because what this troll is saying is super interesting. Like, I actually want to hear it. And also, I love the IQ. Yeah, I wish I could get Kevin in here. If he were here, man, he'd school this guy, but whatever. But yeah, I actually don't mind the discussion. I think it's funny and interesting. And it kind of proves my point because, like, I think I even mentioned at the beginning when I was mentioning Dylan that most people don't associate Dylan with punk rock. But in my opinion, Bob Dylan was, at the time of Don't Look Back, was like a million times more punk rock than like half the bands that label themselves as punk rock. So yeah. I think one of the reasons that like McKay is just ultra awesome for like that era is actually that switch when he was making like hardcore punk with Minor Threat and like saw that it was getting like violent and stupid and getting co-opted by people who would like label what is and what isn't punk rock and started blindly drawing X's on their hands and being like, we're straight edge, we worship this movement, we wear the uniform. He turned away from that and was like, F this, like we're just going to do Fugazi. And that's like the best music McKay made and Mackay. And it's like, there's a reason that was the best because like they literally saw like a stupid uninclusive scene and we're like, yeah, we're bailing. Like this sucks. This isn't what we're about. And I admire the hell out of that. So yeah, boom. So anyhow, that's what I'm getting at. The mark of a good musician is a high IQ. I hate the IQ conversation. Like I could pull that card or pull the education card, but it's like I don't think this dude wants to pull out that card. I really don't. All right. But anyhow, thanks for joining Pills and Ibiza. It sounds like you bailed because you didn't have a point. So good luck to you in your Twitter search or Twitch search or whatever you're doing. All right. After a thing gets popular, there always arise the gatekeepers. Yeah, that's one of the most annoying and infuriating things. And I think we have to actively fight against it. Because I have to admit, like sometimes, with art, when you've been at it for a while, you're like, that's not the way to do it. This is the way to do it. And it's really hard to fight that urge to just kind of like draw parameters and rules and kind of like codes for this is my little club and you can't get in. Especially when you're reacting to, scenarios where like you haven't been let into other clubs and you've already formed your own club and your own thing. It's really like you have to actively like try to fight that kind of exclusionary gatekeeping kind of mentality. And the reason for it is it shuts out other opportunities, like, yeah, anyhow. So there we go. That was fun though. I'm glad. I actually want more trolls. I wouldn't mind more trolls. That was fun. That gave me a little juice of energy. And now I might be able to actually finish this page. I was feeling really tired before that guy came on. Anyhow. So third secret, are you a fan of punk rock? You sound like it. You hopped in. You hopped in like raring to go on the topic, and I'm kind of curious. What are your like top 3 bands, dude? I'm getting a message from Corey. Okay, so it turns out the IRS agency has been updated with the new stream. That's pretty cool. We did a really cool review recently on with Scott Cirkland and Corey Kerr, and went over the book 3 Shadows, and it was a really cool, just profound like book, and it sounds pretty amazing. All right, so Corey's good. I just checked on him. All right, so what do I have for this last? Okay, allowing her to function, curb and fight the panic and depression. Oh my God. Okay. Yeah, I was saying that to Scott when we did it. I was like, I remember that kind of circulating around art school about the time you and me, Chris, were going, and it's just like a beautiful book. But I had forgotten just like how powerful it is. It's really beautiful, like really, really strong, and also like really just like nicely executed too. But yeah, Scott Cirkland brought that to our indie review show, and it was just like really cool to see. All right, so here we go. Curb and fight. But I had forgotten about a lot of stuff, like how it uses tonality, and also just like how heavy the topic is. Like it's so like lighthearted at the beginning, and then it just comes in with like a sucker punch at the end. Okay. To curb and fight panic and depression. So this, I want it to be, okay, so this needs to actually get rid of these hands. And then the other is going to be another shot kind of pulling back from the previous panel. And what's funny is, so you guys might have noticed like my wife, Mai, chiming in there. And like she honestly has like a better knowledge of a lot of punk rock than I do, which is a little known fact about my wife, Mai. The troll left though. He got scared away, I think. I was bummed because I was like, I kind of wanted to.
We'll just talk to you.
I know. I was like, I actually wanted the troll to stick around because I was like, this is fun. I have energy now. I feed off of that.
Remember Tales of Arcadia? Trolls are our friends.
Nice. I like Pill and listening to Jello a long time ago. Yeah, Jello Biafra, man, is and I'm really bad with I think it's Biafra. Like I do the same thing with Ian Mackay too, where I say McKay. And I think it's Mackay. But
He's very political.
I think it's because I got into those bands.
There's so many flavors to everything too, because you've got
Yeah.
some that are like that are super political, who actually went into politics for a short while.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, like
Jello's got such a rad voice. It's just like such a unique, like amazing voice, and also great lyrics, and like a sense of satire. You know, with what he does.
I wonder if it's like an age thing too, because like there's like a certain point where you almost idolize, especially like people like the Sex Pistols, and like their stories kind of tragic and stuff, and you just sort of. But really, they were just kids. I mean, if you think about it, at Europe at that time, there was a strange, crazy heat wave.
Yeah, that's true.
A bunch of teenagers who literally had no future. I mean, there were no jobs. Like, they were frustrated, pissed off.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, like,
so it's
like I was saying about the Clash, it's like career opportunities, right? That's one of my favorite Clash songs. And it's like
that's a different life entirely too. They're on the East Coast of America.
No. Clash was England, London, like crap out of luck, like couldn't get jobs. The whole point of career opportunities. Yeah. But like the whole point of career opportunities is exactly what you're describing, where it's just like this frustration, like you can't get a job. Like the only thing that it seems like they're designing for the poor is like to draft them into the military. And what do you do if you don't want to like work a cash register or get drafted in the military?
I think the difference there was that the Clash.
You need to get closer to the mic, honey. No one can hear you.
Oh, it's okay. The Clash was. They just had a different agenda.
Yeah.
Like they were an actual band. Like they.
Yeah, but those guys were tough as nails. Like I love this. I didn't even know this when I first got into Clash, because I was like, okay, I always thought they were like they kind of were one of the first bands to sort of fuse reggae with punk rock and start kind of thinking like world music.
Punk with other songs.
But because of that, I always like assumed when I was younger, and I assumed they were kind of like lighter. And then like the more I've read about them, I'm like, they were tough as nails. Like during the recording of London Calling, they used to play football, like British football, so soccer, according to us. But it's like they used to play that between recording sessions, and they would like knock each other's teeth out, literally, and then go right back into the recording session. Because they were like
also slightly drunk.
Yeah, and they like, so what's weird is actually like between the Sex Pistols and the Clash, like the Clash was like the guys, like the Sex Pistols were hardcore, but the Clash were guys who like they would beat the like they were not messing around. Like they were legitimately like tough guys. And it's funny because they're all scrawny little dudes, but they're like the kind of guys like you wouldn't mess with at all. Like,
well, the Sex Pistols were pretty tough too. I mean, John Lydon.
No, but there's documentation of the Clash and the Sex Pistols literally having fights. They did not
like each other.
Yeah, and like the Clash always kicked the crowd. Like they always won because they were literal like pub brawlers, and like Sex Pistols were tough, but they were like kind of not kids that grew up like as poor as like.
Well, anyway, I don't know. So, I don't think John Lydon had a great
Hooligans. Yeah, Chris got it dead on.
Yeah. No, they'd probably have a criminal record and all that stuff, but
yeah, 3rd Street, that's dead on though. Like you're right. Like I thought the same. I thought they were lighter because their songs are catchier and poppier. So it's just like on a musical level, you know.
Is it?
On a musical level, like the Sex Pistols are like way more dangerous and scary. But on a real level, like if I had to pick who I was gonna have to fight, I wouldn't fight the Clash.
I don't think John Lydon liked violence. I think he was disgusted by it. Well, he was disgusted by a lot of things, but he did physical contact for one was probably something he was like, ugh.
Yeah. I just love
but
that
the thing is, I feel like they were younger. Like
Yeah.
they were
kids. Yeah.
they were
And to be fair, like Joe Strummer,
I
like
feel
grew
like-
up to be like a peace-loving hippie, but like
I can see where maybe this troll got offended when you use the word boy band because you associate that with
no, he was being
sync.
yeah. I use
Whereas
that.
it's like
Yeah.
you can call them that only because of the fact that they were sort of they didn't come together
Manufactured by a
naturally.
corporation.
They were pulled together by this producer. Well, he sold them out basically.
Yeah.
And I don't think they wrote their own music.
Yeah.
I think John Lydon wanted to, but they kind of, or Johnny Rotten kind of. Anyway, whatever.
No. I love it. I love that. I love this.
It's been a long time since I've thought about any of this stuff.
I love that, like, the one topic that will like get my wife like really heated up and badass is like when somebody's starting to claim what is and is not punk rock. Like that's where like Mai's like, what? she's like, hold my beer.
No. I mean, I get where he's coming from. He probably got offended by that word. But
Yeah.
It's like,
No, he was a little.
I mean, if you.
He was a little trolly
Why
before
do you
that.
think Johnny Rotten was.
He was offended by me saying Dylan was punk rock. That's what made him mad. Which, if you're offended by that, like, I don't know.
All right. Well, how about this? Robert Smith is punk rock.
Yeah, that's true. That is true. I was a person who was not like a huge Cure fan, and this will make me really unpopular. I like them more and more as I get older. But when I was younger, I didn't understand the appeal. But the more I've read about the Cure and the more I've heard the Cure, the more I'm like, they were a complete punk rock band originally. But this is the annoying thing about these discussions of what is and is not punk rock. Because in the early 80s,
genre or sound of music
in the early 80s, you had bands like Devo were punk rock. Early REM, like very early REM, like was considered this weird punk band from Atlanta. Like,
Nirvana.
Nirvana's 90s.
But I'm just saying,
and
Nirvana,
89.
they called themselves punk.
Yeah, but like,
I think
but there,
early on.
But there was this early period where like, you had new wave, you had like post-hardcore, you had, well, not post-hardcore yet, but hardcore punk. You had like different things going on with like reggae and like two-tone, and like all of this stuff was like under this weird banner of punk rock. So you had like,
okay, the Cure wasn't political.
Yeah.
Okay, and they weren't.
Yeah. I love this. Third Secret said earlier REM is punk. It is. The early stuff from Atlanta is great. Early, like Cure, like all that goth rock stuff, like there was no goth rock. Like there was just punk. And it kind of blanketed, like, so Dead Can Dance, like all these different like early goth bands were like punk because like they didn't have a blanket for it. And I love that. That's a good point. Georgia punk is REM. I love that. Also, REM, weirdly enough, turned me on to a ton of punk rock because they did covers. Like they'd do these B-sides where they'd do like a cover of like a badass punk band. And then I'd like dig and find the band because of REM, Yeah, anyhow, I think that's awesome. I also like that my wife gets so worked up about punk. Yeah, more hardcore than me, I think. You did Naked Aggression shows and shit. Like,
no, I never saw them live.
Or was it Agnostic Front? Which one? You went to one where the shows got all wild. Can't remember.
Just a few, but I mean, I was at Anaheim, so it's not like we had a bunch of.
Yeah, but I'm just saying you were pretty legit. Oh, I love this. Third Secret said my wife does too. So the Third Secret seems like a very huge or a fan or a person who was into punk. And I also think like we're probably on the same wavelength because I like post-hardcore a lot more. I like a lot of the weird sort of progression after hardcore punk, like where And then Chris was saying, "My is punk rock," which is entirely true.
Well, if there's anything I like to take from it, it's mostly just to not bow down.
Yeah, I mean, so Ian McKay, or Mackay, I always say that wrong, but Ian Mackay had this really cool interview where he was talking about, this is a long time ago, because like I said, one of my favorite musicians. He was talking about skateboarding teaching him a lot about life. And he was saying, like, you like with skateboarding, he was like, it's like the ethos of punk rock, where you're looking at something that's utilitarian, that's for one purpose, like a curb of a sidewalk, and you're reimagining it for like how you can use it and how you can like
abuse the crap out of it.
Yeah, like rough it up, or like do a really cool trick with it, or like use it for your own means, even though it's like a public thing that like wasn't meant for that. Like you're looking at things and reframing them in real time to see all the different possibilities.
Such an artist.
And that's totally true. I mean, that's totally true. That's one of the reasons, like, the people I tend to get along with the most are people who've skateboarded, or were into punk rock, or were into like underground hip hop. Because like all of those have that in common, where you're looking at what's possible and what's set in stone, and then you're kind of like reimagining it and going like, what if I kind of took it from this angle? And actually, the thing that annoys the crap out of me about the person who was kind of trolling earlier is it kind of like totally disregards, like, to me, one of the most important punk bands ever, which is Iggy and the Stooges. And it's like, if you don't think the Stooges were like listening to like Hendrix and Dylan, like, you're not listening to the Stooges. Like, like the Stooges were like I mean, quintessential punk rock, and as tough as it gets, and yet like it's totally like a stone's throw away from like classic rock. So yeah, anyhow, yeah, I don't like these anti-Dylan nonsense people. Third Secret, how what are you up to? And like, once again, that's cool that you're into punk rock. What else are you into? Are you into comic books? Because that is what I'm working on right now, is a comic, which I need to be drawing currently. But Chris, I'm glad you said Maya is punk rock, because I agree. I think my wife is, she is the most punk rock you can have. Ooh, hang on a second. Okay. Sorry, my friend Corey was like messaging me something. Okay, so curb and fight the panic and depression. This was going to reference, man, I was going to make this a quick finishing the page, but I got distracted by a punk rock conversation. Can't help it. So this one, I actually want to do this. You're in between comics and life. I love it. Well, what brings you here? Third Secret? All right, so I actually wanted to bring this back. Life, work, kids, comics, superheroes, and independence. Good. I like that you included independence, because that's my jam. That's what I do. I rock indies. Chris Caliua as well does some pretty radically awesome indies, and hopefully is managing to get some sleep amid this time. How is everything going, Chris? Are you guys doing okay with all the upcoming tumultuousness? I hope you guys are doing good. I saw the interview on Justin Keyzon's channel. That was really good. It's fun to see. It's also fun to see Justin rocking and doing really good. You did. Okay. See, now I need to know. So, when did you see me? I'm curious. All right. So, this is going to be more of like a purposeful pose, and I think the anatomy might be needing to be a little corrected here. So. I'm on the outs on superheroes and I got my fill and now solely on independence. Yeah, I will occasionally dip into a superhero book, but I haven't paid attention to superhero comics in a really long time. And mainly just because like I just really like indies. Although I'll still get my superhero fix mostly through like the Marvel movies or whatever. But yeah, it's kind of weird. It's like once you go indie, it can be hard to kind of get interested in mainstream ones. Oh, nice. That's cool. Well, I'm glad you saw me on YouTube for a random independent comics video. That's awesome. Yeah, I always feel like indie comics are kind of where it's at. It's just like I don't know, but like once again, it depends on people's interests. I have noticed that there's some cool stuff happening in more mainstream comics that I just like. I should pay more attention to, but once again, there's just so much cool stuff happening with indies that is really hard to even find a focus, with them. All right, so here we go. All right. So I want this to be more of like a actually the hand should be like more like fists. And I kind of think to reflect what I need to reflect here, it'd probably be good to have like two fists. All right. So personally, I feel like thankful that I got slightly trolled in that comment because it's given me the fuel to kind of see past a little bit of the bedtime that I was imagining at the outset of this video. It is kind of a weird thing. Let's see here. There's a new focus on independence being more interest like regular books, unfortunately. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's just been surprising to me because I've been paying more attention to indies, but then, and maybe these are still considered independents, but I would almost group them with like mainstream. But I have noticed like publishers like Image and Dark Horse have really upped their game on a lot of the things they're publishing that I just haven't noticed. And not that I haven't noticed because like they're bad. It's just like there's some really cool stuff going on with those publishers and a lot of variety that I haven't noticed. And I think sometimes it gets like buried by like the capes and tights stuff. And then there's some cool indie like capes and tights stuff. But yeah, in general, the most mainstream I get personally, like on what I follow, like I tend to, I'd say like the biggest publisher I pay a lot of attention to is like Fantagraphics. Um, yeah, and then like kind of go from there. But I do feel bad for like missing some of the really cool things. Like Corey, my friend Corey, like when we're doing um, an independent review show of like different comics, and he brought Limbo in like a couple days ago, well, a couple weeks ago to review, and that comic is brilliant. Like it's really amazing. I mean, keep in mind it's like it is fantasy sci-fi. It's not like slice of life, but it's like really profound and well executed and pretty amazing. So I do feel like I want to like fully rule out. Like I'm pretty open to discovering other stuff. Okay, this needs to change just a little bit. And then we're almost there. We've been streaming for an hour. What I do at the hour mark is usually take about a 20-second break. And then I will be right back. Right, Chris? I literally will be doing the same. Because it's like it's amazing, So all right. Yeah, it's just a beautiful looking book. So all right. So I will be right back in about 2 seconds, 20 seconds more likely, and then we will continue the stream. So if you guys are still here, great. I'm probably going to be going for another half an hour as I finish this up. Thanks to everybody who's joined, and I'll be right back. Thank you. All right. Back at it. I love that. That's hilarious. You should have. You should have. I would have loved to come back to see a lot of crap talking. Preferably like punk related, so I could get all fired up and defensive and crazy about it. All right. So this next section is going to be Ooh, the eyes should be closed here. Okay. So I'm kind of like working in flow here, but like I definitely need to finish this page. And I also want to make sure it's good. Nice beard. I don't know, Chris. I still feel like on the facial hair front, it's interesting. I'm trying to kind of grow it longer, but the problem is it starts getting like crazy where like weird stray hairs end up kind of spreading all over the place. And so I always end up breaking down and like trimming a little bit. But I do feel like I've got like a good, a decent length here. My hope is to get all crazy long with it and then just shave the whole thing off. But I feel like the beard is almost like it's a very strange thing where it like grows on you like a fungus and then eventually you end up kind of attached to it. And now my son is pretty used to like seeing me with a beard, so like I'm kind of stuck with my beard and unless I want like my kid to be like totally traumatized with it. Okay, that is better. Okay. Let me see here. So I got to get this going. This is going to be a similar panel this time over here. And this one's going to be basically like the person waking up suddenly. Have a good night, Third Secret. Thanks for hanging out. And before you go, make sure you hit the subscribe, hit the bell if you haven't yet. And I appreciate you coming by. But if you hit that bell, it'll let you know the next time we're about to go live so you can chime in. It's been fun, man. I'd like to hear more about like if you're into Fugazi, that instantly makes me want to hear a lot of recommendations from you. Like I bet there's a bunch of bands and music you know of that I have never heard of. And yeah, so anyhow, thanks for your contributions too in the chats, man. And then this is going to be the eyes waking up like that. And then the hands open. There is intention to my madness sometimes. So yeah, today has been a massively insane day, and I am gonna need to be done in about an hour. But it's just definitely been one of those days of like a lot of busyness and not a lot of time, and a reinforced theme that I'm having to remind myself of constantly of like um as creatives, I think we tend to like sometimes equate value with what we do, which isn't bad all the time because it does make us like make really cool stuff. But it can be really bad like on days where you're just a human. And that was one of those days. Like today was definitely one of those days. Let's see here. Okay. So we have and wake up. All right, so we are almost there. This one, though, I kind of want to move up a little bit because now I have a little more room for some cool stuff. And it'd be fun to have it tilt a little bit again. Yes. So it's kind of like zooming in, but kind of the same shot. I'm actually really happy about the point I'm at on this because it's page 101. So we're really getting into the crux of the story. And so the next sequence of pages should be pretty amazing, according to me. By the way, Chris Kawagua also has a really cool YouTube channel where he did like a pretty cool After Effects animation of like the X-Wing fighter going through the trench run, and it's pretty cool. I was very impressed by that, Chris. Let's see here. Okay. All right, and wake up. Okay, this is going to be the last set of panels here. Oh, dude, no way. Are you kidding me? Have you played that while driving? I never even thought of that, but that's brilliant to play the trench run while you're fighting or while you're driving. And then you could actually, while you're driving, say, like, almost there, almost there. That's amazing. And Chris, if you were in Star Wars, which team would you be on? Would you be on red? Would you be on yellow? These are important questions. I have a feeling, just a suspicion, you'd be on red. I mean, just a guess, just a wild guess there. Did I merge these somehow? Yes, I did. That's weird. Okay. Merge down. But yeah, that would be really cool. What would be ideal is to have like a navigation device, like, you know, like a Waze app or something that literally is like the Star Wars trench run. I wonder if that exists, and if it doesn't, Chris, you should partner with like a developer and just make that crap happen. So everybody, when they're commuting to work, can feel like they're about to like blow up the Death Star. Okay. Let's see here. And this is going to say, this is actually going to zoom out. So weirdly enough, my car's stupid safety system doesn't let me play DVDs while driving. That kind of makes sense. But it feels like you should be able to override it, but then again, it's like I'm kind of happy you can't. This is like if you know, if like people could do that, they would do it. Probably in an unhealthy way, but still, there's an app developer that made that. I don't think he could get it approved for the App Store because of the licensing or something. That is really a bummer. Because if I were on Waze and it were like the trench run, I mean, it's just like a no-brainer. I don't know. Disney put that out. All right. Okay, here I gotta type this. What I was perceiving as abandonment. As abandonment and okay, this is going to be interesting. Now we're going to bring back that creepy cloud of dark depression. And we're going to zoom out even more. So it's like we're going to isolate this character and then bring a creeping cloud of depression over them. So isolation and clouds. Are you ready for the emotional journey that is about to happen here? All right. I thought you had teddy bears on that bed until I realized pugs. Yes. Well, luckily these are thumbnails, but yes, that will be pugs at some point. Hopefully recognizably pugs. To be fair, pugs look a little bit like teddy bears. Although honestly, Chris, if you could see my pug CK now, he's just starting to look like a very old grandpa. Like he looks a lot like our dog Dozer did. He's starting to get up there in years. It's a little sad, but still also kind of awesome. Because old pugs are really cute, but they're also really old and senile, and he has like really bad hearing too. So anyhow, it's kind of been adorable. There's something great about growing old with a dog. Let's see. And to be fair, I am growing old right there with him. So it's kind of a fun thing. All right. Here we go. In the last few days, my son has gotten super obsessed with Pokemon. And that's a new one. So that's been fun. So today we had a battle, and I have the worst memory in the world. And so when I'm trying to simulate, like he'll choose his Pokemon character and he remembers the names of like the powerful ones and stuff. And I have to choose mine, and I'm like just trying to kind of invent a character, but he'll be like, that's not a real Pokemon. So I have to kind of like look up online. So today I was doing a game with him where, and I like to do this, like kind of play dumb dad. Like it's one of my favorite things to do with my son. So I was like, I'm going to pick the most powerful Pokemon there is. And then I looked up online what the weakest Pokemon is, and then I was like, I'm gonna have to look it up again, but it's like a fish basically, and so it's pretty Whoa, that's actually a really good point. Sorry, that's a profound point you just made, Chris. Yeah, you're right. We're like these weird. I never even thought about that, but like from the perspective of a dog, human beings would be like the Eternals. Yeah, it's Magikarp. So I was like, I have the most powerful Pokemon of all, and Benji's like, who? And I'm like, Magikarp, and he starts laughing. And I'm like, no, it's like the most powerful. I like playing that game with him, where I'll kind of play naive, pretend I don't know. I do that a lot with, like, I did that a lot with Minecraft too, and my son was all obsessed with it. Or he'd want to have like a battle with like Minecraft weapons, and I'd be like, be careful because I will pick the most powerful of all the Minecraft weapons. Mine is made of wood, and he'd be like cracking up because he's like, that's not the strongest. How goes it, Ronnie? How are you doing, man? Ronnie Gunter working on a really cool comic that he shared with us the other day. I hope all is well. Ronnie tends to cruise by here before work, and it's awesome that we get to kind of set the day for Ronnie. So, anyhow, how are you doing, man? What are you up to? How's everything going? This is going to be the attack of the dark cloud. Not the most thrilling of things, but it should work in theory. I do want it to be like almost like it's kind of pouring out from here. I also really would like it to be like it's almost invading from the dark corner of the. Here we go. So Chris, I believe he's in a different time zone. And so we always end up streaming like a couple hours before he goes to work, which is pretty awesome. I think that's how it works out. Correct me if I'm wrong, Ronnie. Ronnie missed the very exciting punk rock debate that happened. Okay, so there we go. 101, and there's one panel left. And this last one's going to be really weird. It's going to be like a close-up of the face. Being controlled by the darkness. Ooh. Sorry to hear that, man. Chronic pain. Yeah, the punk debate was pretty intense. I was literally just casually mentioning an article I read from Ian McKay. I think he did an interview recently where he was talking about influences on his music. And Ian McKay's like a very big figure in punk rock. He kind of created the whole straight edge scene unintentionally, and also was like one of the forefathers of like hardcore punk, which is like the whole 80s hardcore scene. And I was just commenting, like, it was interesting hearing his influences, like, growing up, because as he was growing up, like, most of his influences were not punk at all. Like, they were, like, rock bands and, like, the Woodstock Festival and stuff like that. And it kind of reaffirmed to me, like, the way he was talking about music from that era, like, it reaffirmed to me, like, my conviction that I don't frankly think punk rock is, like, just the category that you'd see like walking into a CD store. Like, I kind of think it's more all encompassing than that, and that it's more just kind of like rock and roll, but just a little tougher. And I just kind of was commenting on that, and then we got joined by a troll very briefly, and it was fun. But then he ran off. I think he was not wanting to have that discussion, which is kind of a bummer because I was enjoying the discussion. Okay, providing a narrative. Narrative. Okay. Providing a narrative. Boom. And then we're gonna swear it's gonna get weird. So this is literally going to be rat or any kind of hair bands are my choice of rock. Interesting. I don't know. Hair bands are kind of fun. I'm not a fan of hair bands, but they can be fun. I think I think the reason I have so much like I feel personal and internal disdain about a lot of the hair bands. It literally has to do with the era I grew up, like where that was actually mainstream for a little bit. But in retrospect, I can really enjoy it. But I also found it funny that, like I said, I thought it was interesting that Mackay found like a lot of influence from non-punk bands, and I do like punk, but I also think punk is a little more all-encompassing. Like, the thing that sparked the whole debate was I made the argument that Dylan, when he made the move from folk to electric, was probably one of the most punk moves I've ever seen a musician make, and definitely was like a moment of punk rock. I feel like Dylan is more punk rock than, or was more punk rock than, like 90% of the bands in the 90s that called themselves punk rock. And that sparked this whole debate, which was interesting. All right, so here we go. We have this is very strange. Okay, now I want to know what this is. What is the Geico commercials having a rat problem in their house? Do they actually have Rat, the band? Because I haven't seen them, and I'm going to have to check them out. And I'm almost done with this page, so I might be able to check that out right after this stream. Because if it's actually a rat problem, that sounds hilarious to me. All right, so here we go. I am about to wrap up the page. And thank goodness I am, because it has been a long and crazy day. I appreciate you guys who have cruised by to check this out. Let me zoom out so you guys can see. This is my crazy page. It's my crazy page. But let me pull this up for you guys. I'm going to have to check out that commercial now. Thank you. I will probably be going to watch a rat commercial. And in the meantime, thanks to everybody who joined in and came by my stream. And you can check out Chris Caligula. his work at chriscaliguia.com. And you can check out Ronnie's stuff. Crimson Owl Comics is on YouTube, so go check it out. And I am Joshua Kemble. And if you haven't yet, make sure you go by Amazon.com and buy 2 Stories Book 1. And I will see you when I see you, which will probably be later today, but not that much later today because it's an early night, 12:30. All right, guys. Thanks again for joining, and time is valuable, and I appreciate you spending the time you have with me. So till next time, bye.